And now, Hall of Mirrors, narrated by Henry Stroger.
There was a parking lot, and then a guitar school, and then Fred's OK used car lot, and then the hypnotist's house, and then a vacant lot with the foundation of a mansion still on it, and then the Beeler Brothers funeral home. Autumn winds, experimenting with the idea of a hard winter, made little twists of soot and paper, made the plastic propellers over the used car lot go. The city was Indianapolis, the largest city not on a navigable waterway in the world. It was to the hypnotist's house that the two city detectives came. They were Detectives Carney and Foltz. Carney, young and dapper, Foltz, middle-aged and rumpled. Carney went up the hypnotist's steps like a tap dancer. Foltz, though he was going to do all the talking, trudged far behind. Carney's interest was specific. He was going straight for the hypnotist. Foltz's attention was diffused. He marveled at the monstrous architecture of the hypnotist's 20-room house. Let his mournful eyes climb the tower at one corner of the house. There had to be a ballroom at the top of the tower. There were ballrooms at the tops of all the towers that the rich had abandoned. Foltz reached the hypnotist's door at last, rang the bell. The only hint of quackery was a small sign over the doorbell. K. Holloman Weems, it said. Hypnotic therapy. Weems himself came to the door. He was in his 50s, small, narrow-shouldered, neat. His nose was long, his lips full and red, and his bald head had a seeming phosphorescence. His eyes were unspectacular, pale blue, clear, ordinary. "Dr. Weems?" said Foltz, grumpily polite. "Dr. Weems?" said Weems. "There is no Dr. Weems here. There is a very plain Mr. Weems. He stands before you." "In your line of work," said Foltz, "I think a man would almost have to have some kind of doctor's degree." "As it happens," said Weems, "I hold 2 doctor's degrees, one from Budapest, another from Edinburgh." He smiled faintly. "I don't use the title doctor, however. I wouldn't want anyone to mistake me for a physician." He shivered in the winds. "Won't you come in?" The three went into what had been the parlor of the mansion, what was the hypnotist's office now. There was no nonsense about the furnishings. They were functional. Gray enameled steel, a desk, a few chairs, a filing cabinet, a bookcase. There were no pictures, no framed certificates on the high walls. Weems sat down behind his desk, invited his visitors to sit. "The chairs aren't very comfortable, I'm afraid," he said. "Where do you keep your equipment, Mr. Weems?" said Foltz. "What equipment is that?" said Weems. Foltz's stubby hands worked in the air. "I assume you've got something you hypnotize people with, a light or something they stare at?" "No," said Weems. "I'm all the apparatus there is." "You pull the blinds when you hypnotize somebody?" said Foltz. "No," said Weems. He volunteered no more information, but looked back and forth between the detectives, inviting them to state their business. "We're from the police, Mr. Weems," said Foltz, and he showed his identification. "You're not telling me the news," Weems said. "You were expecting the police?" said Foltz. "I was born in Romania, sir, where one is taught from birth to expect the police." "I thought maybe you had some idea what we were here about," said Foltz. Weems sat back, twiddled his thumbs. "Oh, generally, he said. "I arouse vague fears among the simpler sorts wherever I go. Sooner or later they coax the police into having a look at me, to see if I might not be performing black magic here." "You mind telling us what you do here?" said Foltz. "What I do, sir," said Weems, is as simple and straightforward as what a carpenter or any other honest workman does. My particular service has to do with the elimination of undesirable habits or unreasonable fears. He startled young Carney by gesturing at him suddenly. You, sir, obviously smoke too much. If you were to give me your undivided attention for 2 minutes, you would never smoke again. Would never want to smoke again. Carney put out his cigarette. I must apologize for the chair you're sitting on, sir, said Weems to Carney. It's brand new, but something's wrong with the cushion. There's a small lump on the left side. It's a very small lump, but after a while it makes people quite uncomfortable. It's surprising how a little thing like that can actually induce real pain. Curiously enough, people usually feel the pain in the neck and shoulders rather than in the lower spine. I'm all right, said Carney. Fine, said Weems. He turned to Foltz again. If a man had a fear of firearms, for instance, he said, and his work made it necessary for him to be around them, I could eliminate that fear with hypnosis. As a matter of fact, if a policeman, say, were only a moderately good pistol shot, I could steady his hand enough by means of hypnosis to make him an expert. I'll steady your hand, if you like, if you'll take out your pistol and hold it as steadily as possible. Foltz did not draw his pistol. Only 2 reasons I ever take my pistol out, he said. Either I'm going to clean it, or I'm going to shoot somebody with it. In a minute, you'll change your mind, said Weems, and he glanced at his expensive wristwatch. Believe me, I could make your hand as steady as a vise. He looked at Carney, saw that Carney was standing, was massaging the back of his neck. Oh, dear, said Weems. I did warn you about that chair. I should get rid of it. Take another chair, please, and turn that one to the wall, so no one else will get a stiff neck from it. Carney took another chair, turned his first chair to the wall. He carried his head to one side. His neck was as stiff as a bent crowbar. No amount of rubbing seemed to help. Have I convinced you? Weems said to Foltz. Will you tell my friends and neighbors that I'm not practicing witchcraft or medicine without a license here? I'd be glad to do that, sir, said Foltz. But that isn't the main thing we came to see you about. Oh, said Weems. No, sir, said Foltz. He took a photograph from the inside pocket of his coat. What we really wanted to ask you was, do you know this woman, and do you have any idea where we could find her? We've traced her here, and nobody seems to know where she went after. Weems took the photograph without hesitation, identified it promptly. Mrs. Mary Stiles Cantwell. I remember her well. Would you like to know the exact dates when she was here for treatment? He opened a card file on his desk, searched for the card of the missing woman, found it. 4 visits in all, he said, July 14th, 15th, 19th, and 21st. What did you treat her for? Said Foltz. Would you mind pointing that thing somewhere else?